All rights reserved with Yolanda Taylor. Tuesdays at 5 on Choice.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our new format on Saturdays at 9 a.m. This is All Rights Reserved. I'm your host, Yolanda Taylor, known as the community lawyer. North Carolina politics, y'all, has some real headlines this week. So on today's show, we're going to break down the headlines from the recent primary election day results. And some of you realize that, this came and went so fast, right? But while some candidates celebrated, others woke up and realized they had lost their seats, or let's say their jobs. This includes Democrat Shelley Willingham out of Edgecombe County and Carla Cunningham out of Charlotte, who did not make it out of their primary races. At the same time, the Democratic Party is also trying to collectively navigate some big internal conversations, including debates around Israel and U.S. policy, and what some progressives are labeling these forever wars that we're seeing ourselves involved in once again. So today we're going to be looking at the big picture. What do these election results really mean? What is happening with the Democratic Party? And how does the party make sure its base stays informed, educated, engaged, and ready to activate? Join us this morning in unpacking all of these issues. And with all of that, I want to introduce someone that you may already know. If you don't, her name is Natalie Murdock. She's a senator in our North Carolina General Assembly. She represents North Carolina Senate District 20, which includes Chatham County and parts of Durham County. She has served since 2020. She made history as the first Black woman under age 40 to serve in the General Assembly. Senator Natalie Murdock has been deeply involved in policy and political discussions around voting access, housing, and just generally economic opportunity for our communities. And she has also had a front row seat to what's happening politically in our state. So let's start with the primary results. Senator Murdock, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Awesome.
For many reasons, personal and otherwise.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
You're welcome.
All rights reserved.
Oh, you're welcome. Before we get to some of these other topics we want to discuss today, let me just start right here. What do these primary election results tell us about where North Carolina voters are right now at this moment?
Yes, I think more than anything, we just saw record turnout. We saw a lot of people engaged. We knew early on that, because I'll take a step back and saying I am a unicorn in that I am a sitting state senator, but I worked on 2 presidential campaigns, a U.S. Senate race, congressionals. So I'm still a strategist and work on a number of campaigns in addition to being a state senator. I was a super volunteer for Congresswoman Valerie Foushie's race, but was definitely keeping an eye on so many races. And actually in the Senate, we knew the race between President Pro Tem Berger and Sheriff Sam Page was going to be a really, really hot one. That polling was showing us it was going to be really, really tight. I'm actually from Greensboro. Every time I went home, I saw a Phil Berger ad every single time I went home. And it is the most expensive legislative race in history at $10 million. Wow. But overall, I think the engagement of voters is really exciting for turnout to be higher than it was in the last few years. We saw that early on when we got through the last Saturday of voting. We knew, oh no, this is going to be very, very high turnout. So it shows people are paying attention. People are engaged. As always with communities of color, we could do better.
Yes.
With the Black vote, we're always going to have to do more work to meet or exceed 2008 levels. The highest Black turnout was under President Obama, but we understand why.
Yeah, we know why.
He's just that once in a generation, if not lifetime candidate that just really excited Black voters. But You saw that turnout was really, really, really high. So it shows that people are paying attention. People are very engaged, and this was across the board, but it also still shows we still have to do better with the youth vote, specifically voters 18 to 25, and the voters that are over 45 still overwhelmingly determine who's gonna win in a number of these elections. So got to do better with getting young people out to vote.
And I do want to get into strategies. I had the pleasure of hearing you speak yesterday at our Delta Day event, and you talked a little bit about the clarity that we need to bring to some of these issues.
Yes.
But before we get there, I do want to ask you, the burger thing. I guess I wasn't paying that close attention to his race. I didn't know it was going to be that close. Did you think there would be a recount?
I did. Initially, President Pro Tem Berger was actually down in the polls by double digits. So this was last year. So kind of politics 101, if you have the money, go on TV. You can raise your profile by 10 points in polling from TV, if not more, depending on how much TV you provide, radio, digital ads, billboards, all the things. Marketing tells us people need to hear your name at least 7 to 8 times. So that's why you see the mail, the radio ads, the TV, and he's the president pro tem. So he has the money and the financing to spend a lot of money on these races. Outside groups came in. That's another thing we saw in these campaigns. But $10 million is insane. I mean, when you just think of if we had that $10 million to put into the community or to put towards a Roy Cooper to be U.S. Senate or to you're an attorney, Justice Earls, to stay on the Supreme Court, to pick up more seats in the House and the Senate. There's so many other things we could have done with that $10 million, but I knew it would be really tight. And so currently President Pro Tem Berger is down by 2 points to Sam Page. And in these rural areas like Rockingham County, your sheriffs are the most popular folks in the community. Everybody knows their local sheriff. He's very present in the community. From what I've been told, I have a lot of family members that live there. You also, from what I was told on the ground, if you are independent or unaffiliated, you get to pick your ballot. So you can be an unaffiliated voter and go vote in the Republican primary if that's what you choose to do. So you also saw a lot of that as well, which is a strategy that I think some groups were a part of, because now of all groups, we have more unaffiliated voters than Democrat or Republican. So a lot of them were in a position. And I actually have friends in Guilford and Rockingham County to vote in that Republican primary.
And I do have friends who told me they're independent just because of that strategy, right? And someone in studios raising their hands as well as being an independent. A lot of black males are unaffiliated. It's very common. But when I read about this, do you think that, like you said, the sheriffs are very popular? They're there, they're in the community, they're doing the work, people see them. Do you think people got the sense that maybe Berger was too Raleigh? You know, he was focused on Raleigh issues. He was, in fact, focused on Nash County, y'all. Why is he all the way in Nash County about casinos? So did people think that maybe he was trying to do things in other places across the state versus doing what they elected him for?
I think there were two big themes. I think it was, for one, nationwide incumbents had a rough night. So no matter where you were as an incumbent, and I actually felt that. People are frustrated and they're closest to the pain. And so Trump isn't on the ballot, but guess who is? These incumbents, right? And so you saw a lot of Republicans have primaries in addition to Democrats. And then no matter what side of the aisle you were on, there were Republicans that lost too, you know, incumbents. So I think it was just a year that was difficult for incumbents because people are frustrated. They can't afford much of anything. Their car insurance is going up, their house insurance, their groceries, their gas. They feel unsafe now. You see people sheltering from Dubai because they saw missiles in the air and they can't get home. So the crashes we saw at the top of last year when we were having issues with aviation. So people are frustrated. They wanted to vent. They wanted to take it out on somebody, and they took it out on a lot of incumbents. So that's why you saw that you had a congressional in New Jersey that was not in favor of an incumbent. You see all the excitement in Texas, but it's for something fresh and new. Two Republicans in Texas also had very, very rough nights. So I think across the board you saw that, but more specifically with this race, the lack of transparency of if it is a casino or any sort of big measure that's going to change the fabric of your area, you need to talk to the people about it. And I say this as someone that has a background in public engagement. Even before I was an elected official, talk to voters. It's still their money. People don't like the appearance of deals being made in smoke-filled dark rooms. If it feels a little fuzzy and funny to them, they're going to be frustrated. So there were protests that we saw. I was told there was one protest against the casino where over 300 people showed up, and that's a lot in Rockingham County.
People, yeah.
They were filling up those county commission meetings, and so we were hearing that on the ground consistently, that on top of the appearance of folks that looked like they were the establishment, not just with him, but other races statewide. If you were perceived as an establishment candidate, and in this instance, just lacking transparency. And so voters remembered that and said, if you want to bring huge, big projects to our community, we want to know about it. And so I think that's a lot of what you saw with that race. And then in comes a very popular, well-known sheriff who's MAGA as well. I mean, I believe he was chair of Sheriffs for Trump at some point. So he was well-known, very conservative, and that's going to work well in a county like Rockingham County.
That is the truth. And for what you're saying too, when you lose touch with the ground truths of your constituents, regardless if they're MAGA or not MAGA, you can lose your seat. So let's go to Edgecombe County. Were you surprised about Shelley Willingham losing the race to Patricia Smith?
I was, and I'll say that because there was just so much name ID and recognition for Representative Willingham. Obviously, consistently, folks have had concerns and maybe complained, but didn't do a lot about it. And two, when you are in a district that is so impoverished, and you are a candidate that is able to say, okay, the reason that I may vote a little funny from time to time is to bring resources to the district. There are voters where that's enough for them. But I think when it came to voting against the interests of this district that does not have a lot of resources and it potentially causes them to have higher energy costs, that was a bridge too far for a lot of those voters. And in all of these districts, these are districts where the governor won, whether it be Stein or Cooper. So when you start overriding vetoes, you're going to have a lot of voters that will have a lot of heartburn because 9 times out of 10, the governor got more votes than the folks on the bottom of the ballot there. So you just have to be really careful and be able to come back to your district to justify why you're voting the way that you're voting. But that one to me was a shocker of the night. I still didn't know if the opponent was going to be able to get it done. Mecklenburg County did not surprise me as much. Because they were working on that for a really long time. Because the other issue you find in rural communities is your field. I mean, when you say you're knocking on doors and canvassing and all that, these homes are miles apart. So it's easier to reach voters than if they're in a Charlotte or even a Concord than it is in Edgecombe County. But it was decisive, and voters spoke and said,
they vote their voice, right?
And they were going to switch it up.
And Cunningham, some of the comments that she made, like those comments went viral. And so and the comments though, to her comment, they told me personally where voters stood. Right?
Absolutely.
I even mentioned something on my personal profile X, and I got dragged. I think about what do you call the people? The African descendants of was it American slaves?
ADOS.
ADOS. I got dragged for that. But hey, I said she was misguided in her vote. And apparently other voters, you guys felt that way as well, right? So I'm not surprised about her, but I was surprised that, Willingham, lost his seat because he has been there for a while. And again, there were some people in Rocky Mount who did appreciate some of the monies he was able to bring to Rocky Mount. Not sure, and I'm not sure if you can speak on this, but is there a dance that if you're elected that you have to do across the aisle in order to bring money and resources to your district?
Some say that, but I was able to secure $72 million for my district for it was the expansion of Woolsby that previously was free and was huge for Siler City. I represent all of Chatham County, and the southern part of the county is more rural, and the largest employers are the county and a chicken plant. So to bring more economic opportunity to that area was a really big deal. We were able to secure that $72 million for my district, and I voted against the budget that year. Wow. So there is a way, I would argue, to do the right thing, to serve your district, and to still stand up for your values. And I think when you're an elected official, you still have to make sure you're serving your district. And to me, a few $1 million for a one-off project is not worth voting against the values of the people that you represent.
Yes.
And I think that that's what the voters for a number of these districts is how they felt that the payoff is not worth it. And yes, I would get more if there were certain bills and certain budgets that I would vote in favor of. But particularly when it comes to starving our public schools by supporting opportunity scholarships, definitely the ICE and immigration issue, that is the issue of our time. The polling in my area, it is a top 3 to 4 issue for people. So if voters did not perceive you to be on the right side of history in regards to ICE and immigration, you're going to really have a hard time. ICE has never been so unpopular. These are our neighbors. People are thinking, oh, this is someone I go to school with, or they're my child's best friend, or they're my coworker, or I've seen them murder protests, those that are protesting on TV in cold blood. People are going to remember that when they vote, and that's definitely what we saw in these elections.
Yeah. And what I would say about you, Natalie, is that even though, or Senator Murdock, what I would say about you is that even though you're a senator, and you too are a lawyer, and even though I call myself,
I don't think so though. I was because I worked at the Department of Justice.
Oh, okay.
So everyone thinks I'm an attorney, but no,
Oh, you're not? I
studied public administration.
God. Okay.
Yep, I studied public administration.
I was about to give you the brand, the community lawyer 2.0. Okay, well, I'm going to give you the brand senator community.
Yeah,
a community senator. Yeah, you're a senator for the people.
The people senator.
Okay, well, that is amazing. See, y'all, I thought she was a lawyer too. I don't know why, but
yeah, so I play one on TV, but being that I worked at the Department of Justice, people assume, and being a legislator.
Yes,
so I always say, actually, no, I worked for Attorney General Josh
Well, maybe
Stein,
that's why you're
governor.
effective. Maybe because you're not a lawyer. I don't know. Maybe that's why you're a little bit effective, because you're not a lawyer. You're able to really see these kitchen table issues, right? Because I think some of the people definitely lost their seat, like Willingham, Shelley. It's because they lost perspective of some of the kitchen table issues. Like, it's one thing to bring a block of money, $8 million to Rocky Mount, which is really not going to go far when you're talking about affordable housing. So is that really going to help those folks? As soon as Rocky Mount gets that money for either, I don't know, housing repairs or weatherization of homes or housing assistance, however the city manager along with the city council decides to allocate the money. I know some is allocated for affordable housing, but when I look at the amount, I'm like, that's already spent before it's spent.
So true. And I think too, when it comes to people, wanting to bring home the bacon and that justifying some of their votes and their opinion, I always say I legislate from 360 degrees. It's more than one way to skin a cat. There are other ways to bring resources to your community. Public-private partnerships. I represent the Research Triangle Park. I was actually just there today for some meetings, and there are ways that you can bring resources and partnerships to your communities that are actually not in the budget, because the legislative process is very slow. We still don't have a budget right now. So I think when it does come to those kitchen table issues, I voted against a bill that would make our energy bills go up some years ago. When it was for that reason, I said I cannot justify Duke Energy having the ability to raise bills for 3 years. It's called multi-year rate making, and I voted no. So even though it actually was a bill that was good for the environment, I'm thinking of my constituents that can't currently afford their power bills, let alone if they double or triple. So for me, I said, sorry, that's not good enough for me. And we need more elected officials that are in the community, listen to their constituents, and then you can be responsive to their needs. I would be hopeful that no one would take a vote and completely ignore the will of their constituents.
Well, I hate to say it, and I guess I'm in a position where I could drop the T. I was in one of those in-district community meetings with Shelley Willingham, and he said that he made the decision on how he was going to vote. He analyzed the bill, he read it, he did what he thought was best. So when you lose touch with the community, and then he also said if you don't like it, you can vote him out, and I guess that's what happened. So that's what happened. You guys in Edgecombe County,
a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy there.
Basically, I'm just like, man, if you want to retire, just say you want to retire. Just resign. Do what you want to do. Like, why we got to take it to the polls? If you're tired, right? But what do you think voters should understand about how these primary outcomes are going to shape the general election in November? Guys, we're not done voting. This is just the beginning.
We're not done voting. So the races you mentioned, the challengers that won, they will serve. So we have something that are called safe seats. To be clear, we still need you all to vote every election. But there are seats that are 10, 15, 20 plus points in the direction of Democrats or either Republicans. Mm-hmm. So that's why you saw so many of these primaries to be contested. For example, President Pro Tem Phil Berger's seat against Sheriff Sam Page. If Sam Page were to prevail, he would win the general election because just with the numbers, it is not a competitive seat. I'm in what you call a safe seat.
Yes.
I need to double check. I think it's a Democrat plus 20 or 22 or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's mathematically very difficult for a Republican to win the seat that I'm in. Mm-hmm. So these folks will be the legislators. They will be sworn in next January. Mm-hmm. But the reason that it is significant is back to the governor and his vetoes. Now this provides more ammunition for the governor to do his job, that when he vetoes something, it is now more likely to hold. And that is why you saw local and statewide groups jump into a lot of these races, because they wanted to make sure that if the governor, back to ICE, for example, if the governor says, we do not want to force our sheriffs to act as federal agents to assist Mango Mussolini and, the DHS secretary, if we say enough is enough, you're not going to force our state to take part in this, our hands are tied, because even though he vetoed that bill, it can be overridden by the House or the Senate, especially the Senate. So I'm in the super minority, and we've got to pick up 2 seats. So we now have a better chance of, when the governor uses that veto pen, it will now have more power as a result of what we saw on Tuesday in the House.
And that's awesome, because like you said, it's very narrow power currently in Cunningham, supposedly a Democrat, or was a Democrat. Well, I don't know what she is, but she ran as a Democrat, and she was seated in our General Assembly as a Democrat. She crossed the aisle with the Republicans to override one of his vetoes around ICE, right?
Yes.
And then the reason given, was just like, I don't know, it seemed hateful. It seemed a little bit racist, a little bit, or what's the word? Xenophobic against immigrants, right? It was more xenophobic against immigrants, because it was just anti-immigrant dialogue. And so I guess voters don't like that. Like you're saying, ICE is really like has a huge disapproval rating, even if people understand.
There are even MAGA voters that are not supportive of
they don't like the tactics.
ICE and Border Patrol right now because it's so aggressive. They
killed 2 Americans.
Killed 2 Americans. This last funding package, they now have more money than some foreign military apparatus.
Yes.
They've never had this much money, and they're just wreaking havoc on our communities, and people are saying enough is enough. And I think too, when you're talking Mecklenburg County, people forget how many Black immigrants that we have.
Yes.
And saw it coming. The Black folks, we're fine. They're only going to do this to Latino voters. First, it's not okay that they're doing it to Latinos. But 2, if you think they're not coming for Haitians and Jamaicans, Africans,
maybe African Americans,
those
too.
refugees may not be able to come. Yep, you can just appear and have a little accent or be out with your mom that's Haitian, and you could get snatched up too. We all saw the video of the Black mother in Chicago, and she said, "What are you doing? My son is an American citizen." And they slammed him to the ground. So when you're a minority, if one is unsafe, we're all unsafe. That's why we have to engage in coalition building. So that's why you saw a very swift rejection of that rhetoric, myself included. I said, I cannot. And hats off to the work she's done on healthcare. She was key to us expanding Medicaid.
Yes.
But you have to represent all of your district. And there are times in history where you have to stand up and meet the times in the moment. And that is not what happened. This community should not be terrorized, and you should not encourage the terror that they're engaged with, especially the children. They're innocent in all this. They are here. They should be able to get education and health care. They should not be ostracized. You have folks that are self-deporting, and you have students that were on the verge of their senior years of high school, and they're self-deporting, and their parents are leaving the country.
Yeah.
So it's a real issue.
It is a real issue, and just to correct myself, I said 2 Americans got killed, but we don't know how many Americans have been killed. We know what's been televised.
At least 2 that were public, but yeah, we
really
I think we're knocking on 4 to 6.
Yeah,
we're up there because there was a black man that was
that didn't get a lot of
that did not get a lot of media attention,
publicity. Yeah,
but unfortunately, since the other 2 were filmed, they got a lot more publicity. So,
and like I said on my previous show, again, I could probably say what you can't say. Privilege does not exist anymore when it comes to ICE. And I think a lot of white progressive liberals, they saw that for the first time. Oh my God, we're getting shot and killed by law enforcement. And not just shot, I mean, just murdered, assassinated.
Because particularly the nurse, he was a straight white male that was a gun owner.
Yes.
And that's what caused even the NRA to write a letter. So that is what got people's attention and over time resulted in them pulling back a little bit in Minneapolis. But it is because it was a straight white male gun owner that was a VA nurse. That is why it was a flashpoint of what are we doing? And it shouldn't take that.
It shouldn't take that.
We all know when it's black and brown lives, people view us to be more disposable and expendable. But that got everyone's attention. So unfortunately, he had to be a martyr, and unfortunately, he has been the like you say poster child for what are we doing? And immediately, the Trump administration scaled back that operation there, and ICE. I think they're gone now, but I know that significantly their numbers dropped and they were removed and put back or deployed back to whatever stations they were at previously. But speaking of ICE and speaking about some of these elections, I mentioned in my opening that, the Democratic Party has to talk about this optic that voters have around whether or not they support Israel. Now, like you're saying, we got to read the room or just read the community and know where we stand in this moment. And where we have to. And I mean, we all before the show, I know I was expressing, I found myself at a MAGA church. I didn't know I was at a MAGA church until George Floyd died. There are good people there. I still talk to some people there, but it wasn't the leadership, but it was like the congregants, like some of the folks there, the ugliness that came out on social media. And I'm like, I was sitting there praying beside you, but you're posting this about George Floyd, on social media. So that's why I said I found myself at a MAGA church. But in church, in Christianity, in our religion, Israel, and what you learn in the Bible, you may learn one thing, but then as you grow and you read history and you research or you visit, like you've had an opportunity to actually visit Palestine, you're able to see with your own eyes, suffering, right? And who's suffering? And
at whose expense is this suffering happen? And was land stolen, right? So, those are things that, Cooper, I'm speaking, well, I can't speak that on the show, but Cooper won his primary. Valerie Foushee won her primary. Now they're going to face the the general election in November, right? So people still have questions about where these candidates may stand on a topic involving like Israel. So what are your thoughts about that? Any thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, both candidates, happy to call both of them, friends and colleagues, especially Congresswoman Foushee. But they are also more than equipped to personally express their views. But what I will share when it comes to Democrats in general, a reckoning has come, and it is long past time. I think particularly with the current war, when we saw the graphic videos on social media, a lot of which was suppressed, of these brown babies being blown up, hospitals being blown up as soon as the border was closed. And this was early on in the war. We knew, wait a minute, you have no other way of getting resources. If you're cutting off this border, what's going to happen in Gaza? What's going to happen in the West Bank? And so the outcry was swift, as it should be. And you nailed it, where I think, for one, it's still very complex. For anyone that reads the Bible, they know that this is a conflict that far precedes all of us. But I do think, if you are Black and Christian and grew up in the church, a lot of deprogramming has to occur. You were raised to support Israel.
Yeah.
And that's what you were taught in church. And myself included, it was not until college that I learned the plight of the Palestinian people. As a legislator, was blessed to have the opportunity of a lifetime to go to Palestine myself, to visit with some of the mayors. I will never forget the visuals of these small containers of water that were on top of the roofs. So to know that they cannot even control their water. If you control how people eat and drink, you control their entire lives. And even met with other governmental leaders and was infuriated. You just don't get it until you see it for yourself. And at the time this was before the war, but it was not safe enough for us to go to the West Bank. So I just saw, but I did see areas A, B, and C in Palestine. I did see that. Even saw the burial ground of Yasser Arafat, who was, a very, very public figure when we did try to get it right, I would say, under the Clinton administration. But it's an issue that will always be pervasive because what was helpful with going over there, the geography, that they are smack dab right on top of each other. And we've got to figure this out. But I think more than anything, it should not have taken the loss and mass murder and straight up genocide of so many Palestinians dying and being killed, and failure to even recognize it as a country.
Exactly.
The overwhelming majority of Palestinians, their passport says Jordan.
Yeah.
They cannot even get a passport. That's sad. I can't imagine being born and raised in a country and my passport does not even reflect that. Yeah. So the anger and the frustration that I felt was real. And they warned us, they said, you're going to come back with more questions than answers. And before the war, I said I wanted to go back. And unfortunately wasn't able to do that. I wanted to go specifically to the West Bank. But I think for Democrats as a whole, people have every right to be concerned about folks that are taking money from AIPAC. And I think that has been swift. Understandably, now more candidates, including Congresswoman Fushia, said she will not take any funding from those groups. And people are now doing more work to make sure when they, dial for dollars and raise money, that they're not taking money from those sorts of entities. And I think it's a reckoning that will continue. I hate that it took so much loss of life and death and murder to get us to this point. But I think that the general public, as far as in the U.S., their views of the U.S. supporting Israel, I don't know if they'll ever go back to the way that it used to be. So for people that are frustrated and upset, know that the protests and the outcry worked. I think that's why you see more members of Congress saying they cannot continue to support providing funding to Israel for them to continue to
and yes, let's talk about
engage
that.
in so much violence in Palestine.
Because I think sometimes, and you could tell me, do you think some candidates are given a bad rep as being moderate or not progressive enough? As we head into the general election, again, talking about Roy Cooper, our former governor, and Valerie Fushie, just looking at some of the negative ads and her opponent, which was a tight race, but her opponent has since unified behind her. So I hope voters, you're realizing that, we need to be a unified front going into the national, why do I want to say national? The general election. I don't know. There's so much going on nationally, and I have a breaking news. I just saw something nationally. It looks like Trump just ousted Secretary Kristi Noem. So anyway,
good.
But anyway, so that's
you know what? That's
breaking
the perfect
news.
lead-in because you know who filed for articles of impeachment.
Yeah,
for the secretary was Congresswoman Valerie Fushie. So that was a great lead-in because she is progressive with a capital P. And votes in progressives 98% of the time, but she filed legislation for her to be impeached. And also shout out to Congresswoman Deborah Ross, who grilled her in a hearing as recently as yesterday. And she is horrible at her job. Horrible. And
even Tom Tillis, we know why. He's retiring. He's stepping down. He's not rerunning again. Even he grilled her a bit. Horrible. Like you said, this whole ICE operation was just like something that most Americans looked at on television, and we realized we could not stomach this, and we will not stomach this. And this is America.
The shooting of, I believe the woman's name was Amanda, the mother that was killed. Yes. We see the footage, and for her to call it self-defense, when she literally says, "Excuse me," something to that effect, she's actually making contact with the ICE agents, but was just shot in cold blood.
and taking the investigation away from the local authorities there on the ground, and then like you said, the lack of transparency and saying, oh, the FBI or we will investigate. How are you going to investigate yourself?
Insane. And when you have an attorney general and AG Keith Ellison who wanted to investigate, that's what he did for George Floyd. And we, had some justice there. And so that is why they took the investigation away from them, because they knew it would be swift and thorough. And the local authorities, their community was ripped apart. Ironically, that murder occurred a few blocks away from where George Floyd was killed. Exactly. So that community needed that healing for them to be brought to justice. Being an ICE agent or Border Patrol does not give you a license to kill, which is why we need to abolish ICE and put them to bed and take all the funding away, which Congresswoman Fushi also filed legislation to completely dismantle ICE. But she is horrible at her job. And then when it comes to FEMA recovery, that has been non-existent out west. It's North Carolina. We know we're going to have flooding and storms in Western North Carolina and Eastern North Carolina every year. So we also need a functioning FEMA, and she did not have the ability to deliver anything to those that have been subjected to hurricanes.
We talk about Christy Noem. Very horrible person, and yet people are paying politics with people's kitchen table issues, people suffering here in North Carolina, and so there are a lot of issues that that voters care about, and our time is winding down. But I definitely appreciate you saying what you said about the candidates that are running and the bad rap that they're getting for being not progressive enough or too moderate. When voters, there's a lot that goes on, behind closed doors. We don't know the battles that are waged and won behind closed doors. And, unfortunately, when you're not in power, as far as you don't have the majority, you do what you can, to bring it home for your district or your constituents. Right?
And also quickly, when it comes to the progressive versus non-progressive and moderate, and I say this as a self-proclaimed progressive, still, what are the issues that you care about?
Yes.
I want you to be progressive, but I also want you to care about murders in your own backyard as well. Exactly. I want you to be progressive, and I want you to care about power and energy bills going up for the people that you represent. I want you to be progressive and care about those that are homeless in your community. Exactly. So I think it's one thing to say it and carry that mantle, but you also need to be doing something in your local community. And it's very frustrating when I feel like as Black elected officials, we're held to a different standard as far as what's progressive and what isn't progressive. And I have to highlight that because when you really look at the electorate, a lot of Black voters are actually moderate and conservative. So they vote Democrat, but they actually are not very progressive. So with some of the folks that lost their elections, I think that was a challenge for them is they've, in some instances, felt they were representing their community that was a little bit more moderate. But there comes a time where you still need to take a stand and do the right thing. But I think that you still have a right to listen to what is it that your communities want you to do. And I also think people need to start listening and stop talking at people. They'll give people these labels and not do their research on their voting record or history. I think we're in a space where sometimes progressivism is coming down to vibes and not a lot of substance. And people need to say, well, wait a minute, what is this elected official doing in the community? What does their voting record look like? Really looking at all of that instead of drawing conclusions when you haven't really done your research. So I would encourage people to have true dialogue, true discussions, reach out to your elected officials, ask them why they're voting the way that they're voting, instead of assuming things too.
I agree. Don't let resentment or assumptions or misconceptions build up. Like I always say here on All Rights Reserved, once you elect someone, you got to lobby them throughout the year.
Exactly.
You have a right to go to Raleigh and actually sit before them and actually ask your personal questions. You have a right to write them and expect an answer or email them. Like they're here for the people. That's their job. So don't ever be afraid that you cannot, after you put someone in office and you have a concern or a misconception or just a question about something, feel free to do that. And to your point, who are we being progressive for? Yes. I know on that housing affordability front, being a fair housing advocate and a housing attorney, I've always said, like, you support luxury apartments, you support gentrification. Who are you really being progressive for?
Exactly.
You're being progressive for people who look like you.
Exactly.
Who all of a sudden think living in an urban area is a total vibe.
Exactly.
But before, you thought it was a ghetto.
True.
You called it, all these deplorable names. So anyway, we could talk on and on, Natalie, but I know we got to land this plane. So I really appreciate you talking about these kitchen table issues that the Democratic Party is concerned about, not just this broad, coming out the Trump administration, affordability. We're talking about real affordability. We're talking about people who are low wealth and low wealth communities. Can they really afford their housing? I know folks who are trying to find rentals, but they're being told they have to earn 3 times the rent to even fill out the application. We're talking about access to the ballot. Last question, clarity.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you talked a little bit about that yesterday around issues.
Yes.
For people who are feeling overwhelmed by politics, because this is our jam, but especially yours more than me, but it's my jam too. And I admire and I love the work that I see you do.
Thank you.
But there are people who feel overwhelmed by politics right now. What are the 3 biggest issues in North Carolina that communities you feel really need clarity on?
Yes, I think when it comes to energy costs, something that I will definitely be working on as a legislator with the General Assembly, there are things that we can do to make our energy bills go down. We've seen it in New Jersey, along with Virginia. I think that's a really big one. Voting rights. People need to show up. They need to vote. They need to know that people are trying to take something away from you because it is very powerful. And when you don't utilize these polling locations and early voting sites, it makes it easier for the local board of elections to take it away. So we need people to vote. We need them to utilize their right to vote. And I think the other one definitely would be when it comes to these immigration issues of just knowing that our neighbors are hurting. They are feeling it. It's impacting the economy because they don't want to go to work. They don't want to go to school. There's a provider that's dependent on Medicaid. She had more no-shows on the days that ICE was in town. So it's just one of those issues that we're going to have to band together as a community and continue to be vigilant about, because we've been here before, especially for Black people, and we need to be clear-eyed. And when people get very overwhelmed, whatever it is that you do, just do it well. You don't have to do all the things. You may not be the protester. You may be the person that contributes to a nonprofit organization, and maybe you're not comfortable monitoring when ICE is in town, and that's okay. But if you have $5 or $10 to shoot their way, if you want to talk to your Uncle Larry about the value of why immigrants deserve to be here, however you want to enter these spaces, you have a right to do that. And definitely for our community members, our faith leaders, shout out to them. They are clothing people and feeding people when the federal government has not functioned, not met people where they were. So I think it doesn't have to be overtly political. It can just be community service. And more than anything, just being kinder to each other. Just this division, this vitriol is not going to get us anywhere. You talked about a healing and coming together as a community. Primaries are a big family feud, and we need to definitely be unified in North Carolina. Governor Cooper has a phenomenal opportunity to pick up this U.S. Senate seat. The polling is in his favor. And, coming off of CD4, us just coming together. Congresswoman Fushi is a phenomenal person, and we don't need this division. We need to be laser focused on winning seats. And with Supreme Court Justice Anita Earls, she is the first step to us getting our courts back. A lot of the issues we talked about today come down to the Supreme Court. When we get a Supreme Court that is not only rational and reasonable, but that cares about people and upholds the law, instead of allowing us to pressure cook the law, we will have a much better state. So all eyes on North Carolina. You will definitely see us continue to be in the national news. And so vote in the fall. Bring 10 friends with you.
And like you said yesterday, don't assume that your grandma, who might be 70, has voted. You say there are people that you've talked to that have said that there were 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds you have thought maybe they voted because maybe they were standing on the shoulder of civil rights movements.
Yes, and got to shout out my sister Jasmine Crockett. Love her to pieces.
Yes,
when she came in the state house, I came into the state senate, and I text her. My friend has a brother in Texas, and her brother is 64. He has never voted in a primary, and he did it because of Jasmine Crockett.
He did it because of her.
So you don't have to win to win.
You don't.
And what she did in Texas, we are still very proud of her. She is Texas tough. But goes to the fact of that's why she ran. She thought she could bring in voters that weren't engaged at all. And so, that's a testament to that 64-year-old that voted in a primary for the first time.
She's a testament to a lot of things. And I know she's getting a lot of hate by the haters, but the haters going to hate.
Haters going to hate.
And especially on Black women for whatever reason. We got to figure out, how are we treating Black women. But That will be another show.
Another show. Another
and I've done 2 series on it already, so maybe it'll be a third one. But we're going to close here. And I want to thank you again, Senator Murdock, for being here and gracing the show with your presence. And y'all, we pre-record. So even though I said it was breaking news that Secretary Kristi Noem, was ousted by Trump, it's going to be old news by the time you hear this on Saturday. Ooh. Well, that's our conversation for today. And if there's one thing we want you to take away from this discussion is that democracy does not run on autopilot.
No.
You have to participate, and you have to bring 5 friends, and you got to bring your grandma, your mama, and maybe your great grandma if you have one. It runs on people who are paying attention. We want y'all to pay attention. That's why we're doing the candidates forum here on All Rights Reserved. It runs on people who ask questions. Don't be afraid to lobby your legislator, the person you put in office. And it runs on people staying engaged. Even after the election headlines fade. Primary elections may be over, but the bigger conversation about the future is just beginning. So stay tuned, because decisions being made in Raleigh affect housing, education, economic opportunity, affordability of your rent, your mortgage, taxes, and whether everyday people feel seen and heard in the political process. Thank you again, Natalie. Thank you again, listeners. I want to thank you for joining us today and for helping us to unpack these tough issues. You've been listening to All Rights Reserved with Yolanda Taylor, the community lawyer. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, we have more power when we unite and move collectively.
All Rights Reserved with Yolanda Taylor, Tuesdays at 5 on Choice.